Hello, friends. Today I am your storyteller. I hope you will enjoy this story. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so that we can receive your love and support. Now let's begin the story. I never thought flipping burgers could put me face to face with death. If you'd told me that a fast food job would be the reason I still have nightmares today, I would have laughed in your face. But here I am, years later, still waking up at 3:17 a.m. in a cold sweat, hearing phantom voices through static, seeing shadows by the window that vanish when I blink. My name's Claire Matthews. Back in 2019, I was 27 years old and living in Evansville, Indiana. It wasn't where I wanted to be forever, but it was home for the moment. I had moved back after college when student loans swallowed me whole. My mom was sick at the time, and I wanted to help her, so instead of chasing big dreams in Chicago like I once imagined, I ended up chasing the clock at a Wendy's off Highway 41. I took the graveyard shifts, Friday and Saturday nights mostly. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid. Rent wasn't going to pay itself, and neither were medical bills. I still remember the first night I walked in wearing that red polo and khaki pants. Grease smell soaked into my hair in 5 minutes flat. I told myself it was temporary, but months stretched into almost a year. And by then, the routine felt as normal as brushing my teeth. Unlock the back door, clock in, prep the fryer, keep the dining room clean, and pray the drunks didn't cause trouble. On nights when the place was dead, I'd sit at the counter with a Diet Dr. Pepper and try to keep my eyes open until sunrise. It wasn't scary most of the time. Lonely, yeah, sometimes eerie, but not scary, at least not until that October night. It was a Saturday, October 19th, 2019. That night it was just me and Diego, a 17-year-old closer they scheduled with me sometimes. He was tall, awkward, and always had one earbud in, listening to rap on low volume while pretending to mop. He wasn't bad at the job, just absent, the kind of kid who wanted to be anywhere but here. "Yo, Claire," he mumbled around 1:45 a.m. "My ride's outside. You good if I bounce?" "Yeah," I sighed. "Go ahead. I'll finish closing." He shrugged, tossed his apron on a hook, and pushed out the back door. I watched his car's headlights vanish onto the empty road. From 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., I'd be completely alone. It wasn't unusual. Corporate didn't care enough to schedule 2 people the full shift. Labor hours were money after all. So I locked the front doors, flipped the menu board to night mode, and grabbed my cleaning list. It was the same every weekend. Scrub the fryers, restock sauces, mop dining room, wipe counters, nothing exciting. By 2:10, the restaurant was quiet except for the buzz of the soda machine and the occasional creak of the building settling. The wind outside had picked up, rattling the old Wendy's sign that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. I was exhausted. I'd been awake since 8 a.m., working on a grad school project before this shift. My eyes burned and my body begged for sleep. That's when it happened. The buzzer. We had an old door buzzer. Anytime the front doors opened, it made a shrill little chime, loud enough to make you jump if you weren't expecting it. But the thing was, the doors were locked. I had double-checked after Diego left. I always did. Still, at 2:17 a.m., the buzzer screamed through the quiet restaurant. Ding! I froze, mop in hand. My heart stuttered in my chest. Slowly, I peeked around the counter. The dining room was empty. Chairs still stacked, floors glistening wet. Nobody. I told myself maybe the sensor was faulty. The register still thought we sold baked potatoes and those were gone 2 years ago. I shook my head and muttered aloud, trying to calm myself. Building's old. Tech's older. Chill out, I went back to mopping. Then, ding. Again. Only this time I saw it. A shadow moved past the far window. Quick, sharp. Too human to mistake for a tree branch. "Hello?" My voice cracked as it echoed through the empty space. No answer. I set the mop aside and walked toward the front windows. Outside, across the 2-lane road under a flickering street lamp, sat a car I didn't recognize. Old, boxy, parked halfway on the curb like the driver didn't care. Its windshield was too dark to see through. Something about it made my stomach twist. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. No idea why. Instinct, I guess. And then the driver sat up. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his eyes on me. He opened his car door, and he stared. I backed away from the window so fast I almost slipped on the wet floor. My chest felt tight, breath shallow. That's when I noticed I wasn't alone. At the far end of the dining room, in a corner booth, sat an old woman. Her name was Gretel Saunders. She was 76, from the assisted living center a half-mile down the road. Gretel had dementia, and she wandered into Wendy's about once a week. Usually we'd call the facility, and someone would eventually pick her up. She'd come in earlier that night, around 11, and ordered a small black coffee. I didn't charge her. She was still sitting there, coloring in a children's book with shaky hands. Now she looked up at me with watery blue eyes. "What did the man want, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice suddenly clear. I froze. "What man?" She pointed toward the door. "The one who rang." "He's been here before, hasn't he?" My skin prickled cold. Before I could answer, the drive-through headset crackled to life. "Hey," a man's voice rasped. "You open?" Relief flooded me. Finally, something normal. "Yeah," I said, grabbing the headset. "Go ahead with your order." Silence. "Hello?" A low chuckle spilled through the static. It was wrong. Guttural. Dark, like someone choking on their own laugh. Then, click. The line went dead. I rushed to the drive-through window. The strange car was still there. That's when I noticed someone else. Russell, the night janitor from the gas station next door. He was crossing the lot toward the dumpsters, carrying a bag of trash. I banged on the glass. He turned, saw my frantic waving, and jogged over. I cracked the door open just enough. "Russell, did you see that car?" He nodded, eyes narrowing. "Yeah, been there a while. Weird guy inside. I saw him walking behind your building too." My throat went dry. "Can you stay here? Just for a bit?" He hesitated, then gave me a firm nod. "I'll make some rounds. Keep an eye out." Relief washed over me as I locked the door again. But when I turned back toward the dining room, my stomach dropped. Someone else was standing there. A man in his late 60s shuffled slowly between the tables, holding a paintbrush in his hand, swiping it through the air, as if coating the walls in invisible paint. "Charlie?" I whispered. Charlie Green, another resident from the same facility as Gretel. He used to be a house painter before Alzheimer's stole his memory. He wasn't supposed to be here, but somehow, here he was. He stopped mid-step, turned his head toward me and said softly, "Don't answer the door alone. He might hurt you." My blood ran cold. "Charlie, what did you say?" He smiled faintly. "The man told me." Before I could react, movement flashed at the side window. I whipped my head. A figure stood outside, staring in at me. Pale skin, hollow eyes, cracked lips, hoodie torn, jeans stained with something dark. Our eyes locked. He didn't blink. I screamed. And then he bolted. My hands shook as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" There's a man outside. He was at the window. Please send someone." The dispatcher kept me talking until 2 patrol cars arrived. The officers swept the lot. They found Russell pacing by the dumpsters, pale as a ghost. He told them the same thing. A man lurking around, circling the building. 45 minutes later, one officer came back inside. "There was a break-in a few blocks from here," he said grimly. "Woman was assaulted. Suspect ransacked her medicine cabinet. She's alive but shaken. Matches your description." He looked me dead in the eye. "Your locks probably saved your life tonight." I nodded numbly, my eyes drifting toward Charlie, who was still humming as he painted invisible flowers on the window. They never caught the guy. A week later, management installed new cameras and updated the alarm system. But they never hired an extra person for night shifts. I quit. To this day, I keep the photo of that car on my phone. Sometimes when I drive past that old Wendy's, I swear I see him again. Not in the car, not by the dumpsters, but in the reflection of the glass. Waiting, watching, from the shadows, from the night, from just beyond the locked doors. Story 2. I never thought I'd look back on a fast food job and call it the scariest chapter of my life. At 24, I didn't have much figured out. No career, no serious relationship, not even a real sense of direction. What I did have was debt, rent due every month, and a sister who reminded me daily that you can't live on potential forever, Jacob. My name's Jacob Riley, born and raised in Springdale, Missouri. Not much happens here unless you count Friday night football or the occasional meth bust. It's the kind of town where you can drive 5 minutes and be in total farmland. The kind of place where folks know your parents' names, even if they've never spoken to you. When I landed the graveyard shift at a 24-hour Wendy's on Highway 65, I told myself it was temporary. I'd save up, maybe go back to finish my degree in environmental engineering. The job was simple. Clock in at 10 p.m., keep the kitchen running, deal with drive-through customers, and clock out at 6 a.m. when the morning crew came in. Double pay for nights, fewer people to deal with. Perfect for someone like me who never liked crowds. The Wendy's itself was one of those freestanding ones you see at the edge of towns. To the north, 2 miles of nothing but trees. To the south, a gas station that closed at midnight and an abandoned car wash. Beyond that, highway stretching empty into darkness. The building was old, the paint peeling, the drive-through speaker crackling like a dying radio. Still, it was steady work. For the first 6 months, the nights all blurred together. Quiet, routine, almost boring. Until that night. The one that showed me how quickly boring can turn into a nightmare. It was a Tuesday. I remember because my manager, Angela, kept griping about how Tuesday nights were graveyard for the graveyard shift. She was 45, a chain smoker, with a raspy laugh that could fill the kitchen. We had this ritual. Every night she stayed till midnight for inventory, and before leaving she'd walk me through the checklists like I hadn't memorized them months ago. That night she was in rare form. Jacob, mop under the fryers tonight. It smells like someone deep-fried a damn raccoon back there. I laughed. Pretty sure that's just the nuggets. She smirked, shaking her head. Boy, you keep joking. One day you'll find out what real nasty smells like. By 12:15, she was gone, leaving me alone like always. The stillness set in fast. That's the thing people don't realize about graveyard shifts. It's not the work that wears on you, it's the silence, the hum of the fridge, the occasional pop from the fryer oil, the lonely ping of the drive-through headset. It gets inside your head. I cleaned, I stocked sauces. I sat at the counter scrolling through my phone, trying to keep my brain from drifting into that weird midnight haze where every sound feels amplified. At 2 a.m., the place was dead. That's when the headset pinged. Hi, welcome to Wendy's. Go ahead whenever you're ready, I said automatically. Nothing. I waited. Hello? Then I heard it. Heavy breathing, male, raspy. Sir? I said, uneasy. A voice cut in. Low, sharp, almost whispering. Don't say anything. Just open the back door, I froze. At first, I thought it was a prank. Maybe one of the high schoolers from the day shift messing with me. My thumb hovered over the mute button. Then the voice came again, firmer this time. I said, open the fucking door. The words hissed right in my ear through the static of the headset. I ripped it off, heart pounding. No way. Nope, I muttered to myself, trying to laugh it off. That's when the bang hit the back door. I jumped so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Another slam, harder this time, rattling the steel. The whole door flexed inward with each hit. Instinct took over. I bolted for the manager's office, slammed the door and locked it. My hands shook as I dialed Angela. No answer. Tried 911. Dead signal. Come on, I muttered, pressing the emergency company radio. Static, nothing. Then silence. No banging, no voice. Just dead. Heavy silence. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Finally, I cracked the office door, creeping into the kitchen. Everything looked normal. My phone still had no service. I edged toward the back door, trying to convince myself it was all some sick joke. That's when I saw it. Blood. Smears of it across the push bar, streaking the handle, dripping onto the concrete outside the tiny square window. I stumbled back, heart slamming. That's when the knob rattled. He was still out there. I spun to run and froze. He was already inside. I hadn't noticed the drive-through window was cracked open after I'd wiped the counter. He must have crawled through. The man stood by the soda machine, tall, early 30s maybe, his dirty white shirt soaked with blood. One shoe missing, hair matted, face cut open above his eyebrow. His hands shook, and in one of them he held a black pistol. "Get down," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. I hesitated, my brain lagging behind reality. "Get down," he roared, eyes wide, veins bulging in his neck. I dropped to the greasy tile, hands up. The smell hit me, sweat, blood, and something sour, like roadkill left in the sun. "I'm sorry," he muttered, voice breaking. I need your phone, your wallet, keys. That's it. Take it," I stammered. "Please, just take it." He snatched my phone, my wallet, my keys. Then his eyes landed on a roll of duct tape by the grill. "Hands. Behind your back," I shook my head. "Please. Don't make me do something I don't want to do," he warned, gun trembling. I obeyed. He bound my wrists, too tight, then my ankles. My chest heaved against the tile. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he whispered. I just need a ride." And then he was gone. I heard my truck start outside, the roar of the engine fading into the night. I lay there shaking, duct tape digging into my skin. Minutes crawled by. 10, 20. Finally, the tape started peeling at the edges, greasy from my hands. I wriggled one free, then the other. I stumbled into the office, grabbed the hard line phone, and dialed 911. This time it rang. "911. What's your emergency?" The words collapsed out of me. By the time officers arrived, I could barely stand. The police cleared the building, found nothing. They said I was lucky. Turns out the man was an escaped inmate, missing for 3 days. He'd killed a gas station clerk 2 towns over, carjacked another driver, and was bleeding from a botched escape attempt. They caught him the next morning, 40 miles east. He crashed my truck into a ditch outside a pawn shop, tried to sell my phone for cash. He was still covered in blood when they tackled him. I didn't go back to Wendy's after that, had my last paycheck mailed. I still work nights, but never alone. Sometimes when the world gets quiet, I swear I hear it again. The faint ping of the headset, followed by that rasping voice whispering in my ear. "Open the door." Story 3, I never thought night shifts would become such a regular part of my life. If I'm being honest, I used to dread the idea of staying up while the rest of the world slept. But bills don't care what you like, and life doesn't stop just because you're tired. Rent was due, my car payment was stacked on top, and I was barely keeping up with groceries. That's how I ended up behind the counter of a Wendy's in Crest Hill, Ohio, working the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift every Friday through Tuesday. It wasn't glamorous. Hell, most nights it was boring, but boring paid the bills. I'd been there a little over a year, mid-20s, single, scraping by in a one-bedroom basement apartment that smelled faintly of mildew no matter how many candles I burned. I didn't hate the job, but I didn't love it either. It was just something to get me through. The Crest Hill Wendy's wasn't in a busy spot. It sat at the far end of an old shopping strip that had seen better days. To the left was a half-stocked Family Dollar, and to the right, an empty storefront that used to be a laundromat before it shut down 3 years earlier. Behind the store was a cracked asphalt lot, fenced off from a drainage canal lined with weeds and brush. Corporate said it was a low-crime area, which meant we didn't get security, but anyone who spent more than a week there knew how isolated it felt, especially after midnight. My crew that fall was always the same. Troy, the cook, early 30s, quiet guy, kind of awkward but dependable. Kayla, a high schooler, bubbly and sweet but always sneaking glances at her phone. Janice, our overnight manager, late 40s, chain smoker, the type who'd seen it all and didn't scare easy. And me, stuck on register, headset for drive-through, cleaning, whatever needed to be done. It was late October the 26th, if I remember right, a Thursday night that bled into Friday morning. We just put up the tacky Halloween decorations corporate shipped out in a box. Orange window clings, fake cobwebs in the lobby corners, and someone stuck googly eyes on the frosty machine for a laugh. The air outside had that sharp bite, the kind that makes you see your breath even if it isn't technically freezing. The shift started like any other. Slow, quiet, almost comforting in its routine. We closed the dining room at midnight but kept the drive-thru open until 1 a.m. After that, it was just cleaning and stocking until dawn. Around 12:45 a.m., the last car came through. A guy in a beat-up Civic who ordered 2 spicy chicken sandwiches and a large Coke. I handed him the bag, wished him a good night, and pulled off the headset. Inside, Troy was refilling the fryer oil. Kayla was half-heartedly wiping tables, earbuds tucked under her hair. Janice was in the office, hunched over the security monitors, with a cigarette tucked behind her ear. I poured myself a coffee, mostly for warmth, and decided to grab my heavier jacket from my car before we started deep cleaning. My car was parked maybe 25 feet from the back door, right under one of the dim orange lights. I always park close. Back in a sec, I called to Troy, who just nodded without looking up. The air outside was still, heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I stood by my car, sipped the coffee, leaned against the hood, and lit a cigarette I told myself I didn't need. I'd been trying to quit, but night shifts like these always pulled me back. That's when I heard it. A sound. Not loud, not obvious, but distinct. Clink. Like metal brushing metal. I froze, cigarette halfway to my lips, and glanced toward the fence. It was hard to see. The light above the door only reached halfway across the lot, and the far fence melted into darkness. My first thought was raccoon, or maybe one of those stray cats that slink through the canal sometimes. They'd squeeze under the fence, dig through the trash, and vanish before sunrise. I took another drag, tried to ignore it. Then it came again. Clink, jingle, clink. And it wasn't coming from the ground. It was higher, maybe chest level. I waved my arm in a circle to trip the motion light by the door. Click. The bulb buzzed, flickered to life, washing the lot in weak yellow light. That's when I heard it. 3 sharp rattles, metal grinding against metal. And then silence. "Hello?" I said, voice cracking a little. I don't know why I said anything. Maybe I didn't want to feel like I was standing out there alone. No response. The fence stood still, but my skin prickled, the way it does when you know you're being watched. I stepped back toward the door, coffee sloshing in the cup. My hand touched the handle just as the fence shook violently. Not like an animal, like someone had grabbed it with both hands and was trying to climb over. I froze, and then I saw it. A shape, tall, upright, standing on the other side of the fence, half hidden in shadow. They weren't just touching it, they were jerking the chain link, like testing it. My stomach dropped. I bolted. Coffee splashed over my hand as I fumbled the door open, darted inside, and slammed it shut. I twisted the lock just as the knob jerked hard from the other side. "Shit!" I gasped, pressing my weight against it. The metal clicked and scraped as the knob twisted again, harder this time. Someone was trying to get in. "Janice!" I yelled, breathless. "Someone's out there! Someone's trying to get in!" The radio on my hip crackled. Her voice came through, skeptical. "You sure?" "Yes, they were right at the fence. I saw them. They tried the door." Within seconds, Janice came fast walking down the hall, Troy behind her wiping his hands on a rag. I stepped back, still gripping the knob like my life depended on it. They stopped now, but I swear to God. Janice pushed past me, her face pale but steady. "Move!" She tried the knob, jiggled it, still locked. She leaned close to the metal, listening. Nothing. Troy frowned. Could be a drunk or a homeless guy. I shook my head hard. No. They were standing at the fence, tall. They yanked on it like they were trying to climb over. And the knob, it moved. I wasn't touching it. Janice didn't say anything right away. Then she jerked her head toward the office. "Let's check the footage." We crowded around the tiny monitor in the back office. Janice rewound the tape to when I stepped outside. There I was, sipping coffee, smoking, waving my arm to trigger the light. Standing, looking around. But the fence? Empty. No shape. No movement. Janice fast-forwarded to when I bolted inside, slamming the door, and sure enough, the handle twisted and shook on its own. Kayla wandered in, pulling out her earbuds. "What's going on?" "Look," Troy muttered, pointing at the screen. We watched again. Me outside. The fence still. Me running back in. The door handle rattling, violently, like invisible hands were wrenching it. Kayla's mouth fell open. "Holy shit! Could be a glitch," Janice muttered, though her voice was thinner than usual. "Could be a camera delay." "No," I said too loud. "That's exactly what happened. I saw someone. They were there." We all sat in silence, the monitor screen casting gray light over our faces. Janice finally stood. "We stay inside. Nobody goes near that back door tonight." Understood? No one argued. The rest of the shift dragged like molasses. Nobody spoke much. We scrubbed, stocked, polished the fryers, anything to keep busy. But we stayed up front, under the lobby lights, never more than a few feet from each other. When 7 a.m. finally came, we clocked out in silence. As I zipped my hoodie, Troy stopped next to me. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I've been here 4 years. Never seen anything like that." "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded hollow. He hesitated, then added, "But I've felt it. That back lot, even in daylight, like someone's out there." Watching, I stared at him. "You think I imagined it?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I think you saw something we weren't supposed to see." I quit smoking after that night, switched to gum, took my breaks in the lobby, or just kept working to stay busy. Anytime someone had to take the trash out, we did it in pairs. Never after midnight. Corporate didn't care. Janice filed it as employee misunderstanding. Maintenance checked the fence. No cuts, no damage. The footage of the door handle? Corrupted 2 days later during backup. Gone. I transferred to a daytime shift at another Wendy's across town a month later. I told myself it was for the better hours, for the pay, but really it was to get away from that back lot, from the silence, from the shadows that didn't show up on camera. Even now, years later, I still dream about it sometimes. The fence rattling, the doorknob twitching, and that tall, dark shape I know was there, whether the cameras caught it or not. Story 4. I never thought working the night shift at Wendy's would change the way I looked at people forever. To most, it was just a job. Greasy burgers, tired customers, and long hours that never seemed to end. For me, it was survival. Rent, gas, groceries. Those were the 3 things I cared about at 27. I lived in a faded 1-bedroom apartment in Crestwood, Ohio. The kind of place where you could hear your neighbor's TV through the walls, and the bathroom tiles never quite stopped smelling like mildew no matter how hard you scrubbed. My car, a '99 Honda Civic with a broken driver's side window switch, was one good frost away from giving out. That's why I stayed. Nights paid a little extra, and extra mattered. The Wendy's sat just off Interstate 71, part of a small travel plaza with a BP station, a 24-hour convenience mart, and a tired-looking motel whose neon sign buzzed louder than it glowed. Truckers passed through, families on road trips stopped by during the day. But at night, well, at night it was just the stragglers, the insomniacs, and the lost. My co-worker on most nights was Megan Torres. She was only 21, sharp-tongued but funny once she warmed up. She had this habit of chewing gum so aggressively I could hear it over the fryers. But I didn't mind. We had a rhythm. She handled drive-through. I took counter, cleaning, closing the dining room, and all the prep work. By now I could make a bacon double in less than 40 seconds flat. We also had a kind of unofficial guardian, Officer Dan Rourke. He was a county deputy who parked his cruiser in the lot most nights. Sometimes he came in for black coffee, sometimes a burger, sometimes just to stretch his legs. Crestwood wasn't exactly dangerous, but there was a comfort in knowing someone with a badge sat 30 feet away if things went south. It was Wednesday, October 25th. I remember because the air smelled like damp leaves and wood smoke from the houses down the road. Megan was late, again, and I was mopping up the last of the dining room when I realized how quiet it had gotten. The kind of quiet where the hum of the soda machine feels deafening. I tossed the mop back into the bucket, turned toward the counter, and heard it. Ding, the front doorbell. I looked up and froze. He was just standing there. A tall man, maybe 6'2", shoulders broad, brown hair plastered to his forehead as though he'd just come out of a storm. He wore a gray t-shirt and dark jeans. At first I thought he'd spilled something. Maybe oil, maybe mud. But then he stepped closer under the fluorescence. My stomach dropped blood. He was drenched in it, shirt clinging to his chest, jeans stiff with dark stains. Even his hands glistened wet red, droplets sliding from his fingertips onto the tile. Drip, drip. My brain didn't want to process it. It was too much, too absurd, like something from a horror movie. But the smell hit next, metallic, raw, real. He looked at me with glassy, unfocused eyes. "Do you got a sandwich?" His voice was flat, almost casual, as if he'd asked me the time. My mouth went dry. A sandwich." He nodded toward the glowing menu board behind me. "Baconator." Something like that. For a wild second, I thought it was some sick Halloween prank. Crestwood was small. People pulled stunts. But then I saw it. A steady line of fresh blood trailing from his left arm, dripping to the floor in a tiny red puddle. This wasn't fake. Every nerve in my body screamed run. Instead, I swallowed hard and forced myself to nod. "Sure, one Baconator, coming right up." "Keep calm, keep steady." I moved toward the prep line, hands trembling so badly I almost dropped the spatula. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Megan at last, sitting on a back stool, earbuds in, phone glowing in her hand, completely oblivious. I needed her out. Now. "Hey, Megan," I called, voice loud but casual. "We're almost out of lettuce. Can you grab the extra from the walk-in?" She glanced up, half annoyed, one earbud dangling. "Seriously? Didn't you stock it earlier?" No, the other bin," I said firmly, widening my eyes. "In the back cooler." "Please," she frowned, confused. But I gave her a look that must have carried enough weight because she sighed and disappeared into the back. The man leaned against the counter, swaying slightly, watching me. I forced a smile. "You okay, sir?" "You're bleeding." He blinked slowly. "It's not mine." My hand froze mid-squeeze on the mustard bottle. "What?" "I don't think it's mine," he murmured, rubbing his temple like someone trying to wake from a bad dream. "I didn't mean to." The words slid over me like ice water. Just then the door opened again. My chest nearly collapsed with relief. Officer Rourke. He walked in casual, one hand resting near his belt, like this was just another coffee run. Smart. He must have seen the blood from the parking lot. "Evening," he said, voice calm. "How's it going tonight?" The man didn't even turn. I slid the wrapped sandwich across the counter with shaky hands. "Baconator for you, sir." The man grabbed it with trembling fingers. His sleeve slid back, revealing a deep gash in his forearm, raw and glistening. "You hurt, buddy?" Rourke asked gently, stepping closer, each foot deliberate. The man finally turned to face him. His eyes locked on the badge, and something changed. His whole body went rigid. "I didn't mean to," he whispered again, voice cracking. "I bet you didn't," Rourke said evenly. "Why don't you sit down? We'll get you patched up." The man backed away a step. My throat clenched. Then, sudden as lightning, he bolted for the door. Rourke lunged, grabbing his shoulder. The man spun, something silver flashing in his hand. A knife, small, bloodied but real. Megan screamed from the kitchen entrance. The sandwich hit the floor. Rourke twisted the man's wrist, the knife clattering to tile. In seconds, he had him face down, cuffed, still muttering, still bleeding. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to." It was over in less than 10 seconds. But the echo of it, the blood, the muttering, the look in his eyes, never left. Later, paramedics and detectives swarmed the plaza. Rourke gave me the bare outline. The man had stumbled from a motel room up the road, leaving behind a body. Multiple stab wounds. A mess. He claimed self-defense, but the scene told a different story. He'd wandered in shock, dissociated, straight into Wendy's for a sandwich. I lasted 2 more weeks before quitting. Management gave us panic buttons, ran safety seminars, but it didn't matter. Every time the bell above the door chimed, my chest clenched. Every time a man in dark clothes walked in, I saw blood in my head. By spring, I moved out of Crestwood, found work in a library in Columbus. Day shifts, quiet, safe. But I never shake it completely. Even now, years later, whenever I drive past a Wendy's or hear the sizzle of bacon on a griddle, I think of him, the man in the blood-soaked shirt, the way he looked up at the glowing menu, voice flat, asking for a sandwich like he'd just come from church instead of a murder scene. And most of all, I remember his voice as they dragged him out in cuffs, broken and dazed, repeating the same thing over and over. I didn't mean to. Story 5. I never thought a fast food job would leave me with nightmares. At 17, I wasn't the kind of kid who worried about that stuff. I was more concerned with scraping together enough money to fix the rusted-out truck my uncle had promised to sell me cheap. I wasn't picky about work. My hands were already rough from summers helping my cousin lay flooring, patch drywall, and sometimes just hauling trash from job sites. Demolition was easy money, and I didn't need a license. No car meant I had to depend on rides, mostly from guys like Rick, my boss. But this story isn't about demo work. It's about the one-side job that stuck with me, the one that still wakes me up at night. It happened in Hollow Creek, Nevada, a place I didn't even know existed until that morning. "You sure you grabbed enough water?" Rick asked as he steered his dented Ford toward the edge of town. "Yeah," I said, holding up the gallon jug in my lap. "Filled it before I left the house." "Good. Ain't no utilities where we're headed," I didn't ask more. Rick wasn't big on explaining things. He was in his 40s, wiry, always with a cigarette dangling from his lips, and a thermos of coffee wedged between his knees. We had an understanding. He dropped me off at a site, gave me a list, and I worked. No babysitting. He liked that. That morning, we rolled out of a McDonald's parking lot just after dawn. My stomach still churned from the Egg McMuffin I'd wolfed down. I watched the neon signs of gas stations and motels blur past the truck window until they gave way to nothing but desert scrub and asphalt. We talked about cars, always cars, his old Mustang project, the Civic I wanted to save up for. I barely noticed the turns, the mile markers, the horizon melting into endless beige. By the time Rick slowed, dust curling behind us, I realized I had no idea where we were. That was my first mistake. The building looked like it had been dead for years. A one-story brick Wendy's, paint faded to a dull brown, weeds pushing through the drive-through lane. The sign out front still clung to its red square, but the logo had peeled into ghostly streaks. "Here's your list," Rick said, handing me a folded paper. "Booths, counter, kitchen line, and the walk-in cooler. Don't bother with the roof or the sign." I unloaded my tools from the truck bed. Pry bar, hammer, gloves, a radio, my water jug. "I'll be back by 6, Rick said, lighting a cigarette. "If I'm late, Mike's crew might swing by." "Don't wander. Ain't nothing out here but sun and rattlers," I gave him a mock salute. He smirked, revved the truck, and drove off, leaving me in a rising trail of dust. Work was work. The booths came out easy enough. I hauled them through the side door, stacking cracked vinyl and splintered wood under the faded awning. By noon, I was sweating through my shirt, arms sore in the good way. My water jug was half gone, but I'd been careful. The silence pressed down heavy. No cars on the road, no birds. Just wind sliding through broken windows and stirring dust motes in the sunbeams. I had learned to tune out that kind of silence, but every now and then, it made my ears ring. The walk-in sat in the back corner of the kitchen like some hulking coffin. No lights, no tiles, just a steel box bolted to the walls. I pulled the door open. Inside, a few busted bins, a rusted shelving unit, and a faint draft that sent a chill up my neck, which didn't make sense. No power, no AC. I stepped in just to check it was clear. The door closed behind me with a click sharper than I expected. My chest tightened. For 1 second, I thought I'd locked myself in, but when I shoved, the door swung open. I laughed at myself, shaky. "Don't be stupid," I muttered. I didn't go back inside. By 4:30, I was finished. I swept the floor, stacked my tools by the entrance, and sat outside on an unbroken booth seat under the awning. The jug was empty. 6 o'clock came. No truck. By 6:40, shadows stretched long across the cracked parking lot. My watch ticked too loud in the silence. "Where the hell are you, Rick?" I whispered. I climbed a ladder to the roof. From up there, Hollow Creek looked like wasteland. desert and scattered blacktop, a handful of structures far off the highway, all dark, no headlights, no movement. The sun dropped and the cold came fast. Desert nights are brutal. By 8, I was shivering in my flannel, hugging myself. My radio hissed static, sputtered a warped bit of music, then died completely. Thunk. I froze. It wasn't a creak, not a pipe settling. It was the sound of something heavy dropping inside the building. "Rick?" My voice cracked. No answer. I grabbed my pry bar and stepped into the dark. Moonlight filtered through broken tiles, silver and grainy. The booths were shadows, the counter, a jagged silhouette. Then I heard it, low, wet, scratchy, whispering. It came from the cooler. I backed away, heart in my throat. Another thud echoed from inside. I bolted, out the side door, into the lot. I pressed myself against the brick wall, clutching the pry bar like it could save me. "It's just your imagination," I whispered. "You're tired, dehydrated. That's all." But my skin crawled, every nerve screaming that something was watching. Out of the corner of my eye, movement. Behind the old drive-through menu board, a shape, too tall to be an animal, too still to be wind. I didn't look twice. I crouched low, trying to melt into the shadows. Through the front windows, I saw it, a shape moving inside. From the kitchen, down the hallway to the restrooms. Slow, casual, not creeping, not rushing. Like it lived there. My legs gave out. I stumbled backward, tripped over a pile of tile, and hit the asphalt hard. Sand stung my face as wind whipped across the lot. Light exploded over me. I blinked, heart hammering. Rick. He stood there with a headlamp and a granola bar. "You all right? You were supposed to be here at 6. My voice shook. "Mike thought I was picking you up." I thought he was. Didn't realize until 9. Drove like hell. I stared past him. At the Wendy's. The windows glowed pale in his lamp. Empty. Still. "Did you know anything about that place?" I asked. He shrugged. "Old franchise. Closed after some employee went off the deep end. Murder-suicide, I think. Just rumors." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Rick helped me up, brushed me off, and we drove away. I watched the Wendy's shrink in the rear view until it vanished in the dark. I never worked alone again. Never without spare batteries, never without twice the water, and I never ever stepped into a walk-in cooler without someone else standing nearby. Some nights I still hear the whispers, soft, scratchy, like voices underwater. And when I close my eyes, I still see that shadow moving down the hallway. Not rushing, not creeping, just waiting. Story 6, I was 9 years old when it happened. Back then, I thought Wendy's was just a fun place. Fries, nuggets, chocolate Frosties, and the little red and white bags they gave you with a cheap plastic toy inside. I never imagined it would turn into the backdrop of the scariest night of my life. But if I'm being honest, the story doesn't really start at Wendy's. It starts with my parents. My mom's name was Catherine Lewis, though everyone called her Kate. She was practical, careful, the kind of woman who labeled everything in the fridge and set timers for the washer so laundry wouldn't wrinkle. My dad, Michael Lewis, was the opposite. Quiet, patient, methodical, but with a streak of suspicion that made him notice things most people ignored. Both of them worked full-time at the Midland Environmental Research Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, a sprawling state-owned office complex that housed several public service divisions. The building was massive, 8 floors, endless beige hallways, the kind of place where the paint was always slightly yellowed and the floors smelled faintly of wax no matter the time of day. It had been built in the late 60s, back when fluorescent lights were considered modern. Decades later, they hummed so loudly it was impossible to forget you were under them. In the early 2000s, both my parents worked long hours there. My dad specialized in air quality analysis, logging reports about emissions and pollutants. My mom worked in water contamination studies, dealing with everything from chemical runoff to old pipeline leaks. Their schedules often overlapped, but when deadlines hit, they'd sometimes stay late into the night, combing through spreadsheets, finalizing reports, and feeding printers that seemed to jam more often than they worked. And because babysitters weren't something they trusted, I often went with them. Friday nights usually followed a routine. They'd pick me up from school, stop at the Wendy's down the street, and then head back to the office for a few hours. For me, that Wendy's became almost like a second home. I had my usual 6-piece chicken nuggets, small fries, and a chocolate frosty, and the staff grew used to seeing me. Most of them were friendly, the kind of people who smiled and asked how school was going. But there was one man who stood out. His name wasn't Mark, but that's what I'll call him. Mark wasn't a Wendy's employee. He was part of the night security team for the government complex across the street. The Wendy's stayed open until midnight, and Mark spent a lot of time there during his rounds, grabbing food, talking to the staff, making small talk with whoever was inside. He was hard to miss. Tall, broad-shouldered, always in his Navy uniform with a heavy flashlight strapped to his belt. He had a voice that was deep but soft, almost calming, and he chewed gum constantly, the faint mint smell following him like cologne. And he smiled, a wide, practiced smile that showed too many teeth. At first, I thought he was cool. He crouched to my level when he spoke, asked me riddles, even pretended to guard the Wendy's door once. "Password sport," he had said, holding his arm across the entrance like a guard. I laughed nervously and made up something like, "Banana pizza." He grinned, stepped aside, and let me through. To a kid, that felt harmless, even fun. My mom thought he was polite. My dad, though, he didn't say much about Mark. But I remember the way his eyes narrowed slightly whenever Mark lingered too long. The night everything changed, it was pouring rain. The kind of rain that feels sharp, cold, almost sideways when it hits your face. My parents grabbed dinner from Wendy's to go and carried it into the building. We settled into the research center's 6th-floor break room. My legs swung under the chair as I dipped fries into my frosty, watching cartoons on a small TV my dad had rigged with an antenna. Around 9:30 p.m., Mark appeared. "Evening," he said, his voice warm as always. He gave a polite nod to my parents, then crouched down to my eye level. "Hey, champ, got your nuggets?" I nodded, chewing. "You want to see something cool?" he asked casually. I glanced at my mom. She was flipping through a binder of water samples, distracted. "Don't go far," she murmured. "Stay with Mark." I hesitated, then slid off the chair, clutching my frosty. That was the last normal moment of the night. Mark led me down the hallway toward the east stairwell. The building felt different at night, emptier, the buzzing of the lights louder, the shadows heavier. His flashlight beam bounced across the walls as we descended. At the basement level, we stepped through a heavy steel door into a corridor that smelled like dust and coffee grounds. "Ever seen a boiler room?" he asked. I shook my head. "Well, tonight's your lucky night." We entered a cramped room filled with pipes and 2 massive, groaning machines. The walls were lined with gauges and rusting valves. "Pretty cool, huh?" he said, his smile stretching wide. I shrugged. It was more creepy than cool. Then his tone shifted. "You want to play a game?" I hesitated. "What game?" He pulled a folded paper airplane from his pocket, crisp and neat. With a flick, he sent it gliding down the dark hallway outside the boiler room. "Go get it, then you throw it back." I laughed a little, nervous but curious, and ran after it. The plane had landed near a janitor's closet. I bent to grab it. Then, click, the lights shut off. A heavy door slammed behind me. "Mark?" I called, my voice cracking. Silence. "Mark!" No answer. The hallway was pitch black. I couldn't see my own hands. My frosty slipped from my grip, the cup hitting the floor with a wet splatter. My chest tightened. I tried to run back, but the hallway felt endless. My footsteps echoed, louder than they should have. "Mark!" I screamed again, but only my own voice came back. I started banging on doors, crying, shouting for help until my throat burned. Once I thought I heard footsteps, slow, measured, but they faded again, leaving me alone in the dark. Upstairs, my mom eventually noticed the silence. She went to check the break room. Empty. "Michael," she said sharply. My dad looked up from his reports. "He's probably in the bathroom." But minutes passed. 10, 15, 30. By then, panic had set in. They searched the offices, the stairwells, every floor. Finally, my mom stormed down to the lobby, and there was Mark calmly leaning against the reception desk, sipping a soda. "Where's my son?" she demanded. Mark blinked slowly. "He was just with me. Told him to wait by the elevators. Maybe he wandered." My dad's eyes darkened, fists clenched. "What the hell do you mean, wandered off?" They searched again. Eventually, my mom grabbed the master key set from the supply closet and ran to the basement. That's when I heard it, her voice. "Ethan!" I bolted down the hallway, pounding on the nearest door with all my strength. It opened. My mom scooped me into her arms, sobbing. My dad's face was thunderclouds. Mark appeared behind them, feigning surprise. "There you are. Told you he wandered." They didn't buy it. Mark was reported the next day and quietly fired by the end of the week. But that wasn't the end. 2 months later, police showed up at our house. They had questions for my dad since he worked in data storage. Turns out Mark hadn't just been a weird security guy. He'd been linked to a small crime ring, smuggling outdated government computers and reselling them for both parts and data. The investigators couldn't prove what his intentions were that night. Maybe I was meant as a distraction. Maybe he planned to come back once the building emptied. Maybe worse. I still don't know. But I never set foot in that Wendy's again, and I never saw Mark after that night. People think horror means ghosts, demons, or haunted dolls. But sometimes it's simpler. Sometimes horror is a kid locked in a basement, trying to understand why someone who smiled and made paper planes is suddenly shutting off the lights. Sometimes horror is quiet. It wears a uniform. It smells like mint gum. It smiles wide. And it starts with, "Hey, champ, got your nuggets?" Story 7. I was 21 when it happened, young, broke, and stubborn enough to think I could handle anything. It was 2021, the middle of all that COVID uncertainty. You remember that year. Masks fogging up your glasses, 6-foot stickers peeling off grocery store floors, people side-eyeing each other like strangers carried poison. Jobs were scarce, nerves were tighter than a drawn bowstring, and every handshake felt like a gamble. When I finally landed a position at a Wendy's in Lakewood, Georgia, just off the interstate, I didn't care that it was fast food. To me, it was independence. My first paycheck with my name on it. My first uniform folded neatly on the bed. My first chance to prove to myself that I wasn't a complete screw-up after getting kicked out of my ex's apartment mid-lockdown. At the time, I lived with my older cousin, Leah. She was 26, worked 2 jobs, and barely slept. She let me crash on her futon with no questions asked. She'd stumble home from her night shift at the hospital just as I was leaving for mine, toss her bag down and mutter, "Coffee's in the pot, don't wake me unless the house is on fire." We weren't thriving, but we weren't sinking either. Survival mode. Lakewood wasn't a big town. It had one high school, a half-empty mall that smelled like mildew, a dollar theater, and a string of fast food joints near the main exit. Our Wendy's sat on the corner, facing the gas station and the off-ramp. The building wasn't new, but it was clean. Big front windows, a parking lot just large enough to feel exposed at night. I worked mostly evenings, 3 to close. The manager, Doris, was in her mid-50s, all business, with a raspy smoker's laugh and a habit of calling everyone "hun." She never smiled, but she ran that place like a ship. You did your job, she had your back. I like that. It made the chaos feel organized. The crew rotated a lot, but one constant was Ethan, the line cook. He was 20, soft-spoken, with curly hair that never stayed under his hat. He cracked dry jokes when you least expected them, which made the silence feel less heavy. Sometimes another part-timer would help on the register, but they usually left early, leaving Ethan and me to handle the late stragglers. Most nights were quiet. I actually liked closing. The hum of the fryers, the scrape of mop water on tile, earbuds in while I wiped down tables. It felt safe, almost comforting, like the world slowed down for a few hours. But that comfort shattered on a Thursday night in February. Warm for winter, the kind of sticky night where the air clings to you. I clocked in at 2:55, tied my apron, and slid into the rhythm. Orders, fries, refills, smiles. Around 4:15 p.m., a tan Dodge van pulled crookedly into the lot, taking up 2 spaces. Out stepped 3 people, 2 men and a woman, mid-30s, maybe older. The woman walked first, tall with bleached blonde hair that didn't quite match her dark eyebrows. Heavy makeup smudged by the humidity. Sunglasses still on despite the cloud cover. She carried herself like she owned the room. Behind her were two men, both in jeans and boots, shirts stained with something I didn't want to guess. Too many rings on their fingers. Pawn shop energy. The woman smiled at me as they approached the counter. Too sweet, too deliberate. "You the one I spoke to about that sandwich earlier?" she asked. I hesitated. "Maybe. What were you looking for?" "That maple chicken one. Y'all said I couldn't get it to go." She rolled her eyes, then softened suddenly. "Not your fault, sweetie. You're just doing your job." She ordered 2 maple bacons, a spicy chicken, and 3 drinks. I noticed the red binder tucked under her arm, a black pen clipped neatly to the front. Strange thing to bring to Wendy's, but I brushed it off. When I carried their tray over, she leaned forward, her perfume thick. "You from around here?" "Yeah, sort of," I said carefully. "We're actually looking to expand a business in this area," she continued, glancing at the man across from her. He was scribbling in the binder. "Ever think about doing something other than this place?" I forced a polite laugh. "Just started here, actually. First job." She reached out, her rings clinking on the table. "We run a private cleaning company. High-end clients, small, discreet. Girls like you do great with us. Polite, presentable. You'd be perfect." The word discreet stuck in my throat. Before I could answer, one of the men spoke for the first time. His voice was gravel. 30 grand easy. Most girls don't even do half the work." I froze, forced another smile. "I appreciate it, but I'm not looking for anything new." She didn't let go. "It's not even cleaning, really. Just showing up, looking nice. We've got a van that picks you up." "No car needed," I stepped back. "I'm on shift." "Thanks, though." The man chuckled, not friendly. I retreated to the counter and didn't go near them unless I had to. At 5 o'clock, they finally left. The woman turned at the door, waved, and mouthed, "You'd be perfect." Ethan came out of the kitchen. "Everything good?" "Some weird cleaning job pitch," I muttered. He smirked. "Hey, 30 grand's 30 grand." "Shut up," I said, punching his arm lightly. We laughed, but inside my stomach churned. That night, Ethan's grandmother picked us up. She was a quiet woman who smelled faintly of lavender and spoke with a soft southern drawl. On the ride home, I mentioned the cleaning job like it was a joke. Her face drained of color. She pulled the car to the shoulder so suddenly my seatbelt locked. "That wasn't no cleaning service," she said, her voice sharp now. "That was traffickers. That's how they talk. Easy work, no car, just see the van." "Honey, you were this close." Her hand trembled on the wheel. I couldn't breathe. My skin went ice cold. My laugh died in my throat. All I could think about was that binder, that wave, that perfume. I almost followed her outside. The next day I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was probably just sleazy salespeople or some MLM garbage. But at 11:30 a.m., a man walked in alone. Late 40s, bald. Button-up shirt tucked in too neatly, carrying a red binder with a black pen clipped on. My chest tightened. He ordered only a black coffee, sat at the booth near the window. No phone, no food, just the binder. Scribbling, watching. Every time I looked up, his eyes were already on me. Ethan stayed in the back, dropping fries. I forced myself to refill napkin dispensers near his table, pretending not to notice. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, he spoke into his phone, low but clear enough. "Yeah, I moved it. Should cover that tonight. The girls are still lined up. I'll send their cuts. Need another spot down here, closer to the water." My knees nearly gave. I stumbled to the back. "Ethan," I whispered, "that guy's with them." Same binder, same pen. He's watching me. Ethan peeked out, then nodded. His jaw tightened. "I'll stick near you. Don't be alone." For 10 tense minutes we hovered, pretending to clean. Eventually the man closed the binder, stood, and walked out without another word. I never saw him again. I gave my 2 weeks the next morning. Doris didn't ask why. Maybe she knew. Maybe she'd seen it before. I never called the police. I should have. But at 21, scared and exhausted, all I wanted was distance. Years later, I still check parking lots before I get in my car. I still keep my phone gripped tight when I close up at night. And I still hear that woman's syrupy voice in my head, leaning close with her sharp perfume, whispering words that make my blood run cold. You'd be perfect. I wasn't. And thank God I never found out what she meant. Story 8. I never thought my first real job would leave me afraid to walk alone at night. Back then, I wasn't worried about strangers or late shifts, or even the sound of footsteps behind me. I was more worried about paying bills on time and not disappointing the people who had already done so much for me. My name's Emily Hart, and when this happened, I was 19. I had just moved from Athens, Ohio to live with my cousin Megan in a small town outside of Springfield, Illinois. Megan had space and I needed a change. My mom had passed a year before, and my dad, well, let's just say he wasn't in the picture. College felt out of reach, and I didn't want to drown in the student debt without knowing what I even wanted to study. So I told myself I'd take a year off, get a job, and figure things out later. The first place that called me back was the Wendy's on Route 29, a squat little building wedged between a car wash and a half-empty strip mall. Not glamorous, but it paid, and that was enough. The first few weeks were fine. Grease under my nails, polyester uniform that smelled like fryer oil no matter how many times I washed it, aching feet from standing too long, but there was something steady about it. Clock in, wipe counters, take orders, bag food, repeat. My co-workers weren't bad either. There was Derek, the assistant manager who'd been there since high school and liked to brag about how he could make 10 sandwiches in under 2 minutes. Tina, a quiet single mom who worked the drive-thru most nights and hummed gospel songs under her breath. And then there was Marcus, my age, all sarcasm and nervous energy, who claimed he was only there until his band took off. I mostly kept to myself, though. I wasn't rude, just cautious. People had always told me I came across as guarded, like I was waiting for someone to prove they could be trusted before I opened up. They weren't wrong. By the time my 3rd month rolled around, I'd gotten used to the rhythms of the place. Lunch rushes were chaos, evenings were manageable, and nights, my favorite, were slow, almost too quiet. It was a Friday in late September, the kind of night where the air still clung to summer, but the breeze hinted at fall. A storm had rolled through earlier, leaving the parking lot slick and shining under the yellow street lamps. By 8:30 p.m., the dinner rush was over, and the dining room was nearly empty. I was wiping down trays at the front counter when the door chimed. He walked in like he didn't know if he belonged there. Mid-20s maybe, average build, gray hoodie pulled up, jeans that looked worn, beard that hadn't seen a razor in a while. His hands were shoved into his pockets, and his eyes flicked around the place before settling on me. "Hey there, welcome to Wendy's," I said automatically. "Ready to order?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze lingered on the glowing menu boards behind me, then slid back to my face. His expression wasn't angry, wasn't even blank. It was something harder to read. Still. Too still. Cheapest thing you got?" His voice was low, rough like gravel. "You can do the 4 for $4, I offered, forcing a smile. "Burger, nuggets, fries, drink." He nodded slowly like he was weighing the decision. Finally, he dug out a crumpled 5 from his wallet. "Been here long?" "Few months," I said, punching in the order. "You like it?" I shrugged. "It's all right." He handed me the bill, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "You look like somebody who should be doing more than this." The words weren't insulting, not exactly, but something about the way he said them, soft, deliberate, made the hairs on my arms rise. I gave a polite laugh. "Guess a lot of us do." He glanced down at my name tag. "Emily, pretty name, thanks." I slid the receipt back and gestured to the side. "Food'll be up in a minute." He moved, but instead of choosing a booth or table like any normal customer, he stood by the napkin station, eyes flicking back toward me every few seconds. From the kitchen window, Marcus leaned out. "Yo, that guy's creeping. You see the way he's staring?" "Yeah," I muttered, trying to keep my voice low. You want me to hand him the bag when it's done? I shook my head. I've got it. When I passed him the bag, he didn't say thank you. Just walked toward the drink machine, filled his cup, and sat down, directly facing the counter. 10 minutes passed. 15, 20. He ate like he had nowhere to be, slow and deliberate, his eyes darting up every time I moved. I tried not to look, but it was impossible not to notice. By 9:25, Marcus whispered again. Seriously, you want me to say something? He hasn't stopped looking at you. I'll be fine, I said, more to convince myself than him. He'll leave soon. But he didn't. He just sat there, twirling a fry between his fingers, watching. By the time 10 o'clock rolled around, my nerves were frayed. I clocked out, grabbed my bag, and double-checked that my pepper spray was still clipped to my lanyard. When I came back up front, he was gone. Relief washed through me like cold water. Marcus wiped down the counter. Dude left about 5 minutes ago. Didn't say a word, just walked out. Good, I exhaled. See you tomorrow. You want me to watch you walk to your car? For half a second, I almost said no, but my gut twisted, and instead I nodded. Yeah, please. The night air was heavy, damp from the earlier rain. The lot was nearly empty, just my car parked under the dim glow of a flickering light post. I was halfway across when movement caught my eye. A shadow shifted behind the dumpster. Someone stepped out. It was him. Same hoodie, same beard, hands balled into fists at his sides. Hey, he called, his voice louder now, echoing in the still air. You got a minute? My pulse spiked. No, I said firmly. I'm off the clock. He stepped closer. I just want to talk. You seem like somebody who'd understand me. I gripped my pepper spray, fingers trembling. The door banged open behind me and Marcus's voice rang out. Yo, back off, man! The guy froze, glared, then scoffed and turned. Without another word, he walked off into the dark, disappearing past the car wash. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside the window set me on edge. 2 days later, the phone call started. No caller ID. The first time, it was just heavy breathing. The second, the same. The third, a whisper. You're always smiling. I like that I blocked every unknown number, but they kept coming. At work, I started parking right under the front lights. I asked Derek if the outside cameras worked. He shook his head. Only inside, sorry. Weeks passed. Then one night after closing, I found a note under my windshield wiper. Lined notebook paper, 4 words scrawled in black ink. You can't avoid me. The police took a report, even sent a patrol car by during my closing shifts. But without proof, without a name, there wasn't much they could do. For a while, it seemed like maybe he'd given up. The call stopped. No more notes, until last Friday. I was off work, finally had a weekend free, and went to Harbor's Supply to grab some things from Megan's shed. The store was quiet, aisles half lit. Halfway down the power tools section, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I turned. It was him. Same hoodie, same beard. You thought you could forget me? He said softly, lips curling into a smile. I miss that smile. You shouldn't have run last time. My throat went dry. I backed up, heart hammering. I don't know you, I yelled, my voice echoing down the aisle. Stay away from me. Shoppers turned. A store clerk rushed over. For the first time, he looked startled. Then he bolted. The police came. This time, there was footage. This time, there was a full report and official investigation. I'm staying with Megan for now. We set up cameras at the house. A detective calls every couple of days, but so far they haven't caught him, and I can't shake the fear. Every knock at the door, every buzz of my phone, every person who lingers too close, it all sends my stomach lurching. Because some men don't just ask for your number. Some don't just stare a little too long. Some want pieces of you, minute by minute, until you can't tell if you're still whole. And some of them don't stop, even after you say no.